What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another Cars 2 modding video. In this video, episode, whatever it is you want to call it, I'll be introducing all of you to the world of Cars 2 modding by covering the fundamentals you'll need to get started. So in today's video, we'll be taking a close look at how the game is structured, walk through its file system, explain the purpose of the major file formats, and pretty much discuss how you can both inspect and touch on the tools necessary to modify those file formats. Yo, what is good, everyone? This is me from the future, 7 months later, and in this video I don't show this because this page didn't exist when I started recording this video, but there is this basic tools page that you can find on the High Octane Pentane documentation wiki page, whatever. To get here, you just go to the main page, then go to targets, of course to the video game PC/arcade, and then the basic tools tab. And this will take you to a page where you can find pretty much every single tool besides FMOD with official links on acquiring them. The reason FMOD isn't on here is because it's not an official link, so I'm going to show you where to get that later in the video. But yeah, I just wanted to put this in the video so that you guys can visit this page and locate these tools much easier. So just letting you guys know. Without further ado, let's get back to the video. I'm noticing that there is a pretty big influx of brand new people because of the new updates and the new releases for Arcade. You know, if you're coming here because of ArcadeEssentials and you're interested in modding Cars 2, well, this is pretty much your avenue to getting started with that. So without further ado, let me start introducing you to the game's file system. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up the game, and there we go. I'm currently in the root directory of the game's files. You may or may have not already taken a quick peek at this game's file system. Everything might appear to be randomly assorted and honestly probably a bit chaotic, but there is actually some logic behind how everything is organized. Once you understand this layout, navigating and modifying the game will become significantly easier. So we'll first begin with what I think is the simplest location in the game, the data folder. Depending on the platform, this may be named differently. For arcade, they use data DX. For PC, which is the original CD/Steam release, they use data DXW. And then the other naming schemes are as follows: data_Wii, data_PS3, and data_XB360. This data folder is primarily responsible for holding the game's FMVs and audio files. As you can see here are the FMVs. We don't really have to worry about this. It's not very important in the grand scheme of things, but the FMVs are pretty much the standard format as nearly every other game out there. They use .bic, which are generated by Bink. So if we head into the sound folder, we'll find that there are a ton of files with the .fsb and .fev extensions. The FSB files are the FMOD sound bank files. These are generated using FMOD Designer, more specifically versions 4.32.8 and 4.32.9, which are noted in these text files. So if I open one of them, we will see that eMusic was pretty much generated in version 4.32.9. Alongside these FSB files, you will also find the FEV files. These FEV files contain compiled event logic such as sound triggers and parameters that are to be used in-game. Both FSB and FEV originate from an FMOD project file saved with the FDP extension. I'll go into more detail about FMOD and its uses in another video in the future, since there is a lot to talk about that would pretty much warrant its entire own separate guide. Now, if we dig a little deeper into this directory, we'll find a folder named Dialog EN. This folder not only contains the main dialogue audio files, but it also contains the list of each audio file, as well as these zips, which host every single character's lip syncing files. Inside of these zip files, let's just open up a random character like Holly, you'll find these ANO files. These files are typically generated using the Anosoft lip sync tool. Anosoft's lip sync tool basically allows you to input a .wav audio file, and the tool outputs a corresponding ANO file that the game would use for lip syncing. However, there is a key difference with the ANO files that were generated for Cars 2. These ANO files that were specifically generated for Cars 2 are actually a binary Avalanche software format, not traditional ANOs. So unfortunately, there is not really a reliable way to generate new ANO files at this moment. And Anosoft's website and tooling presents their own set of limitations. So this will pretty much remain something that will be impossible to do properly until further research is developed. There's also a pretty common mistake that newcomers tend to make when developing mods for this game. Earlier, I mentioned that these ANOs are stored inside these individual zip files. If you try to extract any of these zips and then proceed to zip the files back up using some sort of program like 7-zip, WinRAR, or even Windows' own file explorer, the game will not read them. This is because the game has very specific zip encryption that was utilized. The game will only read these specific encrypted zips and nothing else. You can create newly encrypted zip files with the offsetting tool, which I will touch on a little bit later. If we go back to the root of the data folder, we'll find a DLC folder. The DLC folder is only present if you have Pentane installed on either Cars 2 PC or Cars 2 Arcade. And in this DLC folder, you will basically just find duplicate directories of what already exists in the base game. So here we have a sound folder, and inside we have each individual character folder, which contains their own dialogue file, list, as well as their own set of ANOs. And that's pretty much it for the data folder. Now let's step out of the data folder and move into what I like to think of as the meat and potatoes of the game. And that is the assets folder. This directory contains, as you can see, a vast majority of the game files required for the game to function. But let's go ahead and scroll down and first take a look at the zip files located directly into the root of the assets folder. So let's first take a look at startup.zip. Startup.zip is one of the first files that the game reads when booting up. This archive contains several important files. Here we have all values Aurora. This file contains editable physics settings and can only be decompiled using Unluac. Then we have filelist.txt, and this file simply defines when and where certain game files will be permanently loaded. And then lastly, we have worlddatabase.txt. As the name suggests, this file pretty much acts as a database for the game's worlds. However, most, if not all, the data within it appears unused. As the name of this file suggests, this file pretty much behaves as a database for the game's worlds. However, most of the data within it appears to be unused. The only confirmed functionality is the ability to change a racetrack into an arena map, which just disables respawns. So now if we head back, we also have startup2.zip and startup3.zip. Startup2 doesn't really have anything important, so we'll be skipping over that and talking about Startup3 instead. Startup3 is far more important. Inside of Startup3, if you head into Luatables, you will find a file called carsinfo.luac. This file can also be decompiled using Unluac. This file pretty much defines the character slots and data for every base game character. There's also a pip managerinfo.lua file. For those of you who don't know, Lua is pretty much a scripting language commonly used in games to extend certain game functionality, automate systems inside of games, and just add any sort of custom logic. In Cars 2, it stretches beyond just the usage of adding character slots, so I highly encourage you to explore the other Lua files to see what is possible. So right below the Luatables folder, you'll find the XML folder. You'll find a number of these XML files, and each of these controls different systems within the game. I won't really go into detail here, as nearly every XML file would warrant its own dedicated video, which I will be creating sometime in the future, but regardless, their naming conventions should give you a general idea of their purpose. These files can, however, be simply opened in Notepad. However, I highly recommend Notepad++ for easier readability, as you can see here. The final zip file in the root of the assets folder is data.zip. This archive mostly contains leftover assets from 25 to Life and Toy Story 3, so very little of it is actually relevant to Cars 2 modding. The one notable exception is this file, filelist_we.txt. This text file affects only the Wii and PC versions of the game and serves pretty much the same purpose as the other file list we discussed earlier. So now let's return to the root of the assets folder and go over the individual directories. I'll be focusing only on those that the current modding scene think serve a meaningful purpose or that we currently understand. So let's first start off with the characters and the front-end folders. Both of these are pretty similar, since both of them contain assets for base game characters, as we see right here. The only key difference between the characters and front-end folder is that front-end assets are used in the menus, whereas the character assets are used during gameplay. Every character folder pretty much follows a consistent structure. Each of them contains a zip file with the corresponding character's assets. Inside of the zip file, you'll find a bent file. Bent stands for binary entity. It can define actors within the game itself. However, in pretty much every single Octane Engine title, the developers have used it as an animation table, defining animation usage and animation file locations. I'll explain how these really work in a future video. Here you'll also find an effects folder, which contains character-specific shaders. This folder is optional, and if it is missing, the game falls back to shaders stored in effects.zip, which I will touch on later. So if we head into the in-game characters folder, we will also find car and class directories. These contain shared animations defined by the character's traits, such as weight and class. These animations cannot be edited or viewed at the time of this video. And now if we head into the character's final directory, we will find several important files. Here we have the .oct or OCT, you can call it whatever you want, and we have .mer or .mer, whatever it is you want to call it, as well as the .ibuff and .vbuff files. So let's first talk about the OCT file. This is the most critical file for character modding. It contains model data, material information, and other very important information which I'll get to when I create guides for character editing or porting. OCT files can be decoded and are essential for custom models and material edits. Then we have the iBuff and the VBuff. These represent the model geometry itself, but they are pretty much useless without the corresponding OCT file to load them. So the DBL and the MER files here don't really have any meaningful data, but as far as I can tell, they need to be present or the game will crash. These two files, however, do serve more of a task in different locations of the game, which I will touch on later. Lastly, you will also notice that there is a motions folder. This motions folder will contain character-specific animations, which is why it is under the actual character folder. Unlike the shared car and class animations, these are unique with every character. The front-end versions of all these locations and animations will be named differently because, as I said, they are used in the menus. However, the structure is pretty much the exact same. Now let's head back to the root of our assets and talk about what's in the Choreographies folder. There are hundreds of choreography files in this game, and these are pretty much externally loaded assets referenced by a maps.mer file. These aren't stored directly within the map assets themselves because they serve specific functions or are shared between the maps. While the file structure inside of each choreography shares a similar structure to the character and map files, their purpose is pretty much entirely different. This topic deserves its own video, so I'm just gonna leave this for now. Earlier, I mentioned the shader fallback location. This applies universally throughout every asset in the game. If we go back to the root of the assets folder, we will find the effects folder. and this pretty much contains effects.zip. This zip file contains pretty much every shader in the entire game, and these shaders are stored inside of the TFX files. While we can't view the raw shader code for this game, these shaders can be extracted into their Tupperware format using offsetting. And I know I'm saying this a lot, but I will be touching on what Tupperware is in more detail a little bit later. So now let's touch on the UI, localization, and other similar systems. So the first bits of the UI are located inside of the Flash folder. Here we'll find several directories that are pretty similar, however the important assets we want to look at are inside of flash.zip. This includes pretty much the entire game's UI. The UI was created using Adobe Flash, most likely Adobe Flash 10 and Scaleform GFX 3.3.91. While it's technically possible to edit the UI using Adobe's own tools, most modders rely on JPEGs due to the accessibility and just the ease of use. Below the Flash folder, you will find the Lang folder. The Lang folder will pretty much contain all of the localization for pretty much every supported language by the game. These can be edited using offsetting's indicative, I think is how you say it, but the process is a little bit overwhelming for newcomers, so I won't be covering it here. So now we'll be heading into the UI folder. The UI folder is massive and contains textures for nearly every single UI element in the game. Here you'll find folder names such as car icons, badges, crests, and front-end icons. These names make it fairly easy to identify where each asset is used, and these folders each contain their own OCT files that reference texture paths and image data. So in-game UI assets are directly loaded underneath this UI folder, whereas the front-end UI is loaded from OCT files inside of UI.zip. If we go down slightly under the Lang folder, we will also find the Luatables folder. This is similar to the Luatables folder that we saw in the startup zips. However, now this has its own Lua scripts in it as well. As I said earlier, I would encourage you to take a look at these yourself if you want to see what they actually do. Under the Luatables folder, we will also find the Objects folder. This Objects folder contains map-specific objects and triggers, which is listed via a maps AP file rather than the .mir file. Then we have the Particles and the Scripts folders. These folders remain pretty much largely unexplored, but we know that in the Scripts folder there are files with the extension SX, and these SX files utilize the Slang scripting language. At the moment, we don't really know much about the Slang scripting language, and nor do we really have a way to decompile or fully understand these files. Going back to the root of the Assets folder, underneath the UI folder, you will find the Weapons folder. This folder contains weapons.zip, and when extracted, you'll find various different files that seem like they correspond to the weapons in the game. However, the purpose of the files in this directory are pretty unclear. There are multiple locations where weapon assets appear to exist, but as far as I'm aware, these go completely unused. But I could be wrong, so if anyone has proper information on this specific area of the game, feel free to correct me. So if we head back once again, underneath the Weapons folder, we will find the Worlds folder. The Worlds folder contains the bulk of the game's file size. Each zip file you find here is very obviously named with the location in mind. So as you can see, you have Tokyo A, Tokyo B, Tokyo C, so that would be Ginza Sprint, Vista Run, Imperial Tour. These are the 3 Tokyo tracks separated into 3 different models. Then you have Me_Tokyo right here, which stands for Mission Tokyo. Me is the prefix for the arena maps. So Me Air, Me Italy, Me London, and Me Oil are all arena maps used for Hunter, Disruptor, Arena, all those big map modes. So if we head into one of these map archives, such as Oil Rig for example, you'll see that they include familiar formats mentioned earlier, such as OCT, MIR, DBL, iBuff and VBuff, but you'll also notice that there are some new formats here, such as BTD, BTM, AP, MTC. The familiar formats that you see here serve pretty much the same purpose as before, but there are some differences in the corresponding information inside of them. So we're not really going to be worrying about the files we've already seen before. However, we can look at the new files in this location. So let's start off with the AP. The AP file loads objects, triggers, and have some ties to the Meridian file. And the AP file can also be opened with any sort of notepad or notepad equivalent. So as you can see here, I just opened the AP, and you can see various triggers. So here's a trigger for Wit Drift A Glow Arrow 1. So this is just one of the arrows that appears on the ground while you're drifting. And then there should be more, so Glow Arrow 2, 3, 4, and there should be, just other stuff in here. So you can see that there are a bunch of settings for these as well that you can modify. So yeah, that's pretty much the AP. So now let's talk about the Meridian file. So the .mer or Meridian file places choreographies, spawn actors, triggers such as drifting triggers, two-wheel driving triggers, and so much more into the world or the map. A mix of what's in here is taken from the AP, and some of it is done straight from the Meridian file. As of now, we don't really know the extent of what Meridian can do or why it's so important, so typically we leave it alone. And lastly, BTD and BTM. Both of these files are bullet physics specific formats that are used for the game's collision. We currently don't have a way of creating or extracting any information from these. And I know I still have to cover the DBL and the NTC, but unfortunately at this very moment, the purpose of these two files is completely unknown. So if we head back to the assets directory, we will find the last important folder, which is the XML folder. So if we head in there and extract the zip contained within there, we will find a plethora of XML files. These files can be edited directly in a text editor and control various systems throughout the entire game. There aren't many XML files in here that we really understand, but the ones that kind of make some sense to us are the controls ones. These control files basically just have the button mappings depending on each platform. So controls button action is used globally throughout pretty much every version of the game. And then you have Wii specific control schemes here, 3DS, whatever that means. I mean, I don't think it's the 3DS version, but it's here anyway. The full extent of the other XML files functionality is still pretty unclear, but there are assumptions that can be made by just looking at the names of them. So here we have cars animations, so maybe this affects the car animations in some way. And then there's game progression, so maybe you can edit some of the game's progression in this file. Who knows? Who really knows? So that's pretty much all of the vanilla game files for Cars 2 the video game. There is, however, the DLC directory, which I touched on earlier, but that was the directory for DLC audio and DLC sound effects and whatnot. This DLC directory under the assets folder is actually just for the actual DLC characters. So if we go into Car 000, let's go into the first character here. So we will find four different files here. So we have the characters folder, the choreographies folder, the Frontend folder, and the car number.zip. So this is pretty much set up the exact same way as base game. The only difference is that every character is separated into their own character slot. So if we go back into car 0000, we will see that there is a characters folder and the character file name. So I've been modifying my game a little bit, so obviously I have two characters here. But regardless, the file structure is pretty much the exact same as the base game. So we'll have the same car and class tour files with their corresponding animations. And of course, if we go into the character folder, we'll have the rest of the character's assets in there as well. It's a pretty similar situation here with the Choreographies folder. This Choreographies folder will pretty much load any assets that the character needs inside the game, such as the disruptors, because the character's disruptors are stored inside of the Choreographies folder. As for the car number.zip file, if I extract that, go into it, you will see that there is a Lua, a PNG, another Lua file, and lastly an XML file. So I won't be going into too much detail here, since creating your own character slot in the DLC directory would probably warrant its own tutorial and video, because it's still a fairly new process and a lot of newcomers in the modding community are currently trying to get their bearings on how this method works. So I'm just going to go through a quick overview of these files real quick, since they're pretty short. But car 000.delta.lua, this first Lua file is for the localization for this DLC slot. So as you can see here, we'll have car desk, American agent, and then we'll have the text for him right here. Same thing here with the car name, American agent equals rod, torque, redline. So that's how DLC character names are given. It's through this file. And the PNG would just be the icon of the character. So as we can see, Rod's icon is right here. And then if we go into cars info DLC, this is pretty much the exact same thing as carsinfo.lua that I showed you earlier. So this is just where the character's slot is going to be stored, and when the game boots up, it's going to load the slot based off this file. So as you can see, this slot is reserved for American Agent, and then it has all the other corresponding information about him. So that's it. That concludes the entire game's file system. I know that was a lot of information, and you don't need to memorize all of it right away. This video will always be here, and it will continue to be updated as new tools are developed and our understanding of these file formats improves. Now that I've provided a solid look at Cars 2's file system and formats, we can move on to discussing the tools used for modding and where their use is applicable. Alright, now that we've concluded our look at the game's file system, I'm now going to be talking about the tools that we use to mod Cars 2, the video game. So let me first talk about the most essential tool for modding Cars 2, offsetting. Offsetting contains everything you'd ever need in a tool with one simple download. It is a command line tool, but it works wonders. Offsetting has the most important function of all, which I mentioned earlier, zip encryption. Without encrypting zip files for Cars 2, the game will not function properly. So currently, offsetting can do these things: encode and decode Tupperware, and Tupperware is the format used in majority if not all Octane Engine games. It's multi-purpose, however, because it's all the same format, offsetting can easily encode and decode it by using the simple command that I will put on screen, as well as show its usage after. So before I get into showing you how to decode and encode these Tupperware files, I'm first going to show you how you can install offsetting. So here is the offsetting GitHub page. Normally, when you download offsetting, you'll want to go here to releases and then download offsetting.exe. Or if you're on Mac OS or Linux, you would download either one for whichever platform that you use. Because I'm on Windows, I'm going to download the Windows version, so I'm going to download that. I'm going to open its location, and as you can see here, I have offsetting.exe. Normally, when you download this file has to be copied into every single location that you're modding in. So if I come back here where my mir, OCT, and TFX are, if I paste this file here, I can now use this to decode and encode these three files since it is in the same location. However, there is a way you can avoid copying and pasting this file into every single location, because that just gets extremely tedious and it just wastes a lot of time. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. So you want to click the Windows button and type in environment variables. and then you will see edit the system environment variables. You want to head into that, and then you'll see the environment variables button, which you will want to click. And once you're here, you want to look at the system variables section, and you want to scroll down until you find path right here. Once you see path, you want to double click it, select new, and then you just want to paste the location of wherever you have offsetting. So because offsetting is in here, I can copy this and paste this as a new location. However, I already have offsetting installed here, so I don't need to add this, so I'm just going to delete this. But for you, since you're installing this from scratch, or maybe you're doing this for the first time, you will want to keep your directory listed here. So then you press OK, OK again, and then you press apply, and then OK. And now that you have offsetting in your environment variables, you can go ahead and delete the file from all other directories that you're not going to be using. And now all you have to do is open a terminal and start doing the commands. So now I'm going to be going over the basic command usage for encoding and decoding Tupperware. So first off, you will want to type in offsetting.exe, and to decode any sort of Tupperware file, you will always use OCT decode. So it doesn't matter if you type in mir, tfx, it's not going to work. You have to specify OCT here, otherwise it's not going to decode or encode the file that you want. And then next, you're just going to type in the file that you want to decode or encode. In this case, I want to decode oilrig.oct, and I want to decode it as oilrig.oct.json. So whenever you're decoding with offsetting, you can either choose to output the file as a .json or a .yaml file. So YAML would be YAML, like that, but most people just do JSON just because we're all used to it. And if you want to extract textures, you add the -t argument at the end, which will extract the textures from the OCT file if it has any. And then you press enter, and then you just let offsetting do its thing. Decoding process might take long depending on whether you're decoding a map or a character file. Typically, map files will take far longer to decode because there's so much more information in there, but for characters, it should take a few seconds at most. And there we go. The entire oilrig OCT has been decoded, alongside with all of its textures, as you can see here. So if we go back in here, we will find two new files. We have oilrig.oct.json and oilrig.oct.textures. So if we go into oilrig.oct.json, you will see the entire decoded OCT file. So we have the subnetwork pool, reference file pool, and so much more information in here. Model information, texture information, so many different things in this file, which I won't be able to cover today because there's so much to cover here. And then now we have the textures folder. So this is where all the textures will get dumped. So the textures all get dumped in their specific locations as the OCT has them listed. So here, if we go into characters, we will find random character textures for the boat that you see at the very beginning of the track on oilrig. So that's pretty cool. So everything should be organized here depending on how the map was set up. So if we go to material library, we will see the various different textures for objects, object barriers, and signs. And 9 times out of 10, these textures are very organized. As you can see, these are all signs. We have the oil rig signs, the signs for the arrows. And if we go to barriers, we will have the textures for all the barriers, including this, which are the arrow signs telling you where to go. And then we also have objects, so like objects like crates, big crates, and also, I guess, building lights. I guess those are considered objects. Very interesting. And then we have gameplay icons for the actions that you can do in game, which makes sense. It makes sense that these are in here because these are to be used during gameplay. And yeah, everything else is pretty much organized. It's exactly where you would expect it to be. And yeah, that's how you would decode an OCT file. Now, if you want to encode the file, what you would then do is type in offsetting.exe, OCT encode, and then you would then type the input file that you want to turn into an OCT. So instead of doing oilrig.oct, because it's already an OCT, you wouldn't put it first. You would put the JSON first because you're trying to turn that into an OCT. And then the output file that would be created would be oilrig.oct. And then if you have any textures involved with your OCT file, you always want to add the -t argument. If you don't add the -t argument, it's going to error. And if it doesn't error and it actually does build the file may crash your game. So now we'll press enter, it'll embed all the textures, and that's it. Encoding happens in the snap of your fingers. So now that we've decoded and encoded an OCT, I'll quickly show that this also works for the other file formats in the game. As long as it's Tupperware, it will decode it. So I'm just gonna quickly decode the MER file, and because the MER file doesn't have any textures, I don't have to add -t to it. And there we go. That happened pretty much instantly, and if I open it, I will see all of the Meridian information in this file, which, as I said earlier, we don't really have a good grasp of what Meridian actually does, so I can't even explain any of this to you anyway. And then lastly, we have a TFX file here, which is the game's shader format. So I can go ahead and change the oilrig.mer to the TFX file. So we'll output it as tfx.json, and then boom, here we have the JSON file for our TFX file. So here we'll see various shader information. We can see the parameters that this shader uses. So we can see that it uses diffuse color A1. We can see that it uses G final alpha, alpha modifier, scrolling, all that other stuff. There isn't much we can really do to edit this since we don't have the raw shader code as I mentioned earlier. This is just pretty much showing what the shader is capable of doing, and that's about it. We can't really actually modify them to make them work as we want. Okay, so that was encoding and decoding Tupperware files. Now let's go ahead and look at how to pack and unpack DCT files, which is the file format for the game's localization. So I'm just going to grab some random localization files from the lang.zip file inside of the game. So I'm just going to let's grab English NTSC underscore ctr.dct. Let's paste this in here. And you will also need the string IDs file. This string IDs file is necessary to unpack any of these DCT files. So if I scroll down, I should be able to find it. There's a lot of localization and supported languages in this game, so it can be kind of difficult to find. However, what I need to find is string IDs underscore CTR. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like string IDs CTR is available, so what I'm going to do is grab string IDs from Win32 and look for a Win32 DCT file. So here, I guess I'll use Italian. Italian Win32.dct. Let's paste this in here. Let's delete the CTR one since that's pretty much useless to us. Now is open a terminal, and you're going to want to type in offsetting.exe and then DCT unpack. And then you're going to want to type in the corresponding DCT that you're trying to unpack. So I'm trying to unpack Italian underscore Win32.dct. And then you also want to include string IDs underscore Win32.dct in there as well. And then you can just type in the location of where your unpacked DCT files will be stored in. So I can just call it unpacked, and boom. So this will just output as the name you put it as. So if I name it output, as you can see, it makes a new folder called output, and it will be here as well. So let's go ahead and just go into my unpacked folder, and then we will see that there are two files here, metadata.json and translation.json. So metadata.json doesn't really matter. what you have to look at is translation.json. So if we go into it, you will find various pieces of the game's text. So as you can see here, we have car unlock racer GT2. So this is the text that will appear under the unlock status for racer GT2, which is Miguel Camino. So I could easily change this to, hello, I am Miguel Camino. And then once I save that, all I'd have to do is pack it. So instead of doing unpack, you would then do pack, and then you would basically copy the rest of this. So we can do Italian win32.dct, and then string IDs win32.dct, and then you would basically just type in the folder that you're trying to pack. So my unpacked folder is going to be packed because of the pack command. I press enter. Okay, that did not work. I think what you're supposed to do is put the folder first before the DCT files. Yes, okay, that's how it works. I apologize if that confused you for a second, but this basically works the same way, except you would put the folder name before the DCT files. And then now with these two files, I can place these back into the lang folder, replace whatever exists, and then I can go back and now use the offsetting zip encryption command, which is very simple as well. So I would just open in terminal once again, and then do offsetting.exe zip or zip c2 like this. So both zip and zip c2 work for Cars 2. Zip will just default to the Cars 2 zip because that's the one that's widely used in the community. So I'm just going to use zip because it's faster to type, and then type in lang, which would be the input folder that you're trying to turn into a zip, and then the name of the output zip file. So I wanted to overwrite the existing lang.zip, so I'm going to call this lang.zip as well. So I forgot I'm using a pre-release version of offsetting, so my zip command is actually called Y, but for everyone else watching this video, the command will be zip or zip c2. If you do try the Y command, it's just not going to work because it got removed in the full release. But anyway, as you can see here, my lang.zip has been updated. It now says 2/24/2026 at 11:34 a.m., which is currently the time that I'm recording this. This should now contain my updated DCT files. So next time I boot up the game in the Italian language, I will see that whatever message appears for unlocking Miguel Camino will show up as hello, I am Miguel Camino instead. So I just showed you all the basics of offsetting, but there are a plethora of other tools used by modders, which I'll currently touch on now. I'm not going to go too in depth since I have full-on guides on how to use all of these tools efficiently and effectively in the works. Alright, so here is the next tool. This next tool is the Cars 2 Arcade Texture Gamma Fix, or as some people call it, DWCaps3 patch because of the Python file or whatever. But anyway, what does this tool do? Well, as the repo description states, this is a script that patches DDS file headers at the address 74 from 0 to 01, which makes them appear gamma correct in Cars 2 Arcade. So in simpler terms, this script basically allows textures to be patched so that they don't appear overly bright in Cars 2 Arcade. Cars 2 Arcade has a specific way that it reads textures, and if they are not patched in that specific way, the textures will appear overly bright, or I guess technically they're just not gamma correct. So this script effectively fixes that issue. This will patch the textures for you, and it will make the textures appear gamma correct in Cars 2 Arcade. So they're not going to appear fully bright, and they're going to look completely normal. So this is pretty much used whenever you want to do a texture swap, or whenever you're importing a custom model and you want to use custom textures. You want to use this tool so that your textures will appear properly in Cars 2. If you've noticed, I've been making this video for the past, it's already July, but I've been making this video since January. Yeah, it's been quite a long time. and there have been some updates to some of these tools. So I am having to re-record this section because this tool got a massive update. Basically, the update is that you no longer need Python and you no longer need to download the Python script. You can actually just download the command line exe binary version, whatever you want to call it, from the releases tab, which is so much more convenient and so much easier to use. But before I show you how to use it, the README here states that you should not be using this tool on normal maps. Normal maps are basically the textures that end in _n, so you don't want to be using this tool on normal maps. Let me show you how to download this. So just go to the releases tab. The latest version should be version 1.0.0. I don't believe I'm gonna have to update this because it's pretty much completely functional and it's perfect, so I don't have to change this. But yeah, you just want to download the c2a gammapatcher.exe file. So I'm going to download that, and here I have it. Alright, so here I have it downloaded. However, you can actually put this file into your environment variables just like how we did earlier with offsetting. So I'm going to actually move this to a new location. So here we have offsetting. Honestly, I might just rename this folder to cars to tools. I'm gonna rename it like that, and then I'm just gonna paste the Gamma Patcher file in here. I am gonna rename it though because the name is kind of long. I'm just gonna call it C2A. Actually, I'm just gonna call it, yeah, I'm gonna call it C2A GP, like that. So I know that it's gonna be called Gamma Patcher and it's for Cars to Arcade. So I'm just gonna name it that, and then I'm gonna go to my environment variables. So I'm gonna click the Windows button and just search for environment variables. I'm gonna open that, and then I'm gonna click the environment variables button, and then I'm gonna look for my offsetting path, wherever that was. I think it was in here. I'm gonna edit, and then here it is. Yeah. So I'm just going to edit this, and I'm gonna change offsetting to cars to tools, just like this. So now I can save that, press OK over and over, and now the C2A Gamma Patcher should work. So to test it out, I have a location here for texture patching, so I'm going to grab some textures. So let me just head over to a random location. I'm going to grab something random. Alright, so here I have grabbed some Jiren Twin McQueen textures. So here I have McQueen Jiren Twin Body, McQueen Jiren Twin Light Glass, and McQueen Jiren Twin Light Glass _n. So this is a normal map. Remember what I said earlier, normal maps, they do not want to be patched. They shouldn't be patched. They cannot be patched because the game already reads normal maps the way they are. So if you have a normal map in your texture patching folder, just remove it. So I'm just gonna cut and then move it to another location. So I'll just temporarily move it to my downloads folder. And then now we have two textures here that we want to patch. I have McQueen Jiren Twin Body and McQueen Jiren Twin Light Glass. So I'm gonna want to create a folder. I guess I'll just call it textures. It doesn't really matter what you call the folder, but you just want to make a folder where you're going to want to put the textures that you want to patch in. And I'm just going to drag them in there. And now all you want to do is right click, open in terminal, and you're going to want to use the command that we saw earlier. So here the usage is script file -i and then the folder path. So I'm just going to type in the name of the script file. So it is going to be c2a gp.exe. So if you didn't rename your executable file, it will be c2a gamma patcher.exe, or if you renamed it to something else like texturefix.exe, you can also do that. But since I named mine c2a gp.exe, I will type it as such, and then I will do -i or -i, whatever, and then the folder path. So I just want to right click and then copy as path and then paste it right here. And now I just want to press enter. Boom! as you can see, McQueen German Twin body has been patched. It will let you know when it has been patched. And if a texture is already patched, it will also tell you that right here. So turns out the light glass texture has already been patched, so I don't have to patch that. So now we have two textures here that have been patched thanks to this tool. And as a little side note, if you decide to download the Python script for literally whatever reason, the script file section is pretty much the same thing. So you see how here it's called dwcaps3patch.py. You basically just want to replace the script name here with the Python one. So instead of c2a gp.exe, it'll just be the py file, and then I'm gonna press enter. And I don't have it in my environment variable, so obviously it's not going to work. But if I did, it would work the exact same way as the exe. However, I do not recommend downloading the Python file because then you'd have to set up Python and this and that, and it's just not worth it. Just download the binary version because it is so much easier and accessible to use. So yeah. Okay, now for the next important tool, we have FMOD Designer. FMOD Designer allows the creation of custom FSB files, which, if you've been watching this entire video, you'll know is the audio format for this game. I also mentioned earlier that the FSB files that were generated for Cars 2 were mostly generated on versions 4.32.09 and 4.32.08. However, I'd highly recommend using FMOD Designer 4.32.09 simply because that's a newer version, and also that's most likely the version that the developers used during this game's development. So we'll go ahead and download this zip file here, and we'll just let that download. Alright, now that that's downloaded, you want to open the folder, extract or open the zip file, and in there you'll find several different versions of FMOD. However, don't get overwhelmed. The version that we want to download is right around here. Right here, FMOD Designer 4.32.09. Obviously the dots aren't there, but this is the version that we're looking for. So all you're going to want to do from here is double click this. If it asks you to extract the files, make sure to extract them, and then you're just going to want to open this file, run it, and install FMOD Designer. So this is about as far as I'm going to go with the FMOD explanation, since it is a pretty in-depth tool and it will warrant its own video. And there are already some tutorials on how to modify the music and dialogue for this game anyway. Alright, I'm back from the future to tell you about the Unluac tool. So as you can see, it is still July. I'm back from the future once again, and this is another section of that video, or of this video rather, that I had to re-record because, well, previously my previous recording for Unluac is now outdated. The link to acquire it is, well, not available anymore, and also I found a much better tool. So if you go to the Pentane documentation wiki page, you will see at the bottom that Unluac is listed. So Unluac is used to decompile files created by Luac. So earlier in this video, I talked about the Lua files and that they're encrypted. So this is the tool that allows you to decrypt them. So most files will have the Lua extension, but there may be some exceptions, just like I mentioned earlier with the Aurora file. So some files will have different extensions, and they will basically be Lua files in disguise. Let me get into this actual tool. So there is both a web version and a command line version, but obviously for the sake of making things easy, I will just explain the website version since it is just so much easier to use. But if you do like using command line tools, you can just go ahead and download unluac.exe for Windows and whatever else for whatever platform. And once you have this downloaded, you can just put it in the same location as the rest of the tools. So Cars 2 tools, you can just put them in here so that you can use Unluac from literally any location. If you don't want to use the command line option,
there is the website option. So let me open that. And as you can see here, I already have a file. For the sake of showing you how this works, let me just close it all and start from scratch. So this is actually extremely easy. All you want to do is click this file button right here, and this will ask you to open a Lua file. So I'm actually in the Cars 2 Xbox 360 files right now, and here I have a encrypted carsinfo.lua. So all you want to do is go into this, open it, and as you can see, it will completely decrypt the Lua file, and you can modify this to your heart's content. And you can do this with pretty much any file, any Lua file that is encrypted in the game. If it's already decrypted, do not do this because it will just mess up the file even more and the game won't be able to read it. But let's do this with pip manager info. As you can see here, now we have a Lua file for this as well. So it's honestly pretty cool. This website is super easy to use. You just literally open the file with the click of a button. It's actually crazy how easy it is. I can do the same thing with allvalues.aurora, as you can see here. Now everything in this file is decrypted as well. So all of these can be modified to your liking. And yeah, I mean, it's that straightforward. I don't really have anything else to say. But yeah, I did mention earlier today as well that, or earlier in this video rather, that you can use decrypted Lua files in Cars 2 the video game. So just for proof, let me go into my Cars 2 arcade assets. I'm going to go to the assets folder, and then we'll go to the startup 3 folder. So I have two here. This is one I was testing. Let's just use the original one. Let's go into this, Luatables, and then carsinfo.lua. And as you can see, this carsinfo.lua is actually decrypted. So the game can read decrypted Lua files. I don't know why they were encrypted to begin with, but I digress. It doesn't really matter now, does it? But yeah, that's basically how you can use Unluac. It's just that easy.
So the last set of tools I will be looking at are the Cars 2 Blender scripts. So these scripts are pretty complicated, but they basically allow for the importing and exporting of models from Cars 2 directly into Blender. So I'm not really going to show how this works right now because I have a custom model tutorial coming up. I'm currently making that. This tool is fairly new. There's still a lot to learn in using it, so covering it now would basically help nobody because I don't know much about this. Nobody else really knows much about how this works, but there is going to be a dedicated video for this coming soon, hopefully within the next 2 or 3 months because I am busy. So yeah, but anyway, I would still go ahead and download these files just in case you want to use them in the future. But yeah, that's pretty much the entirety of this Cars 2 modding beginner's guide. As I said earlier, I know that there's a lot here that can seem overwhelming. However, if you give yourself some time and with enough patience, you can become a top tier modder and pretty much work as efficiently and as effectively as possible. So this guide doesn't serve as a way to give you all the answers, because if I were to give you all the answers, this guide would probably be days long, and I think it's better to separate bigger things into their own guides as opposed to shoving everything into this. But regardless, I do hope that this guide provided a good barrier to entry for Cars 2 modding. But regardless, I hope this guide helped you overcome that barrier to modding Cars 2. I hope it provided more insight into all the game's files and how they work and how you can manipulate them to your liking. So with that out of the way, thank you for watching. Hopefully this helped. Let me know in the comments below if you would love to see more guides like this that will help you on your modding journey. So with that out of the way, I will see you guys in the next one.